Hello everyone, and welcome to your after-lunch dip. It's a quick bite, so I've got 15 minutes, and I'd like to fill it with a lot of content, so let's dive right in. My name is Sander Verbruggen. I work for a Java company, VX company, as a Java and cloud developer. And today I want to show you what I think is the best way to configure your Spring Boot application in a Kubernetes environment using Helm-charts. And the almost mandatory show of hands: who uses Spring Boot? Who uses Helm? Who's afraid of Helm? I'd like to change that. Okay. For this, I created a very, very simple application, which is a set of controllers which are configurable. This is my message controller. It has two configurable endpoints. They return a variable message. And they also introduced two controllers with feature flags. So there's an alpha controller, not quite stable, but awesome. And the beta controller, which is quite stable, so we could try it out. And as in any application, you'll have a file containing your configuration. There's some Spring stuff in there. And in my case, both features are turned off, and I've got two messages. No surprises here, I guess. If I run this one, and I open up my so this is normal Spring Boot application. It just runs, and I've prepared some demos which return one of the quotes, the message of the day, and both features are returning 404s because they're not available. And like you always do with Spring Boot, you can just change this and, for example, set this to true, rerun the application, and if we now try the alpha feature, we got an awesome result. So this is how Spring Boot works. And now, if you want to move this application to the cloud, you first have to create a Docker image for it. I've done that already, so no hassle there. And if you Google this, you'll could try Helm-charts to deploy this to your cloud environment. If you've ever used the Helm tooling and created a Helm chart with it, you might be overwhelmed with the number of files it created, the number of complexity in it, the Go templating going on, and if you're coming from a Spring Boot background, it's overwhelming. It's difficult to understand. So what I tried to do is create a very simple, almost bare bones deployment in my Helm chart, which is called one chart. And it just contains still a lot of boilerplate code, but this part should be recognizable for people using Docker or Docker Compose. It's the way I tell Docker to Kubernetes to deploy a container called one chart. It's based off the Docker image one chart, which is on Docker Hub, and it exposes the HTTP port to the outside world. I've created a service for my own demo purposes, but that's not part of this demo. And this is basically the way to run your image in the cloud. What is missing here is the configuration. So if you want to reconfigure your application, so turn on one of the features, then you have to somehow get the configuration into your Helm chart. If you Google this, then you'll find probably one of two methods. One of them is use environment variables. You can override any Spring property using an environment variable. And the other one is create a config map. And both suffer the same difficulties, the same problems. And I'll try to explain it with this config map. And what the solutions tell you to do is use the application YAML, which you've created. I'll open it side by side. Is this readable for everyone in the back? So you're taking your application YAML, and you have to put it into a config map, which is YAML on its own, and it's part of a template, so you can't put any actual values in there. You have to put in some templating code to make Helm understand, okay, this is the structure of the YAML file, and the actual values are somewhere else. And of course, the Google solution tells you you need a values file for that. That's the wrong one. It's this one. And I, on purpose, messed this up because this application YAML on the left is your original application YAML from your project. The values behind that should match with the YAML structure in the values of your Helm chart. But there's no reason to have those structures match. So instead of having an application YAML that has a demo app and features and messages, it's just now all on one level. And why? Yeah, because we can. So what happens is that your application YAML, which you've carefully crafted, is just torn in half, and half of it is put into the config map, the keys of the configurations, and the other half is put into your values file, as in the actual values of some unknown in-between structure. And to match it up, you have to write these kinds of templating codes, which is, yeah, why would you throw your application YAML away? And if you want to add a feature, if you want to add an alpha feature, I'll first have to add it to the config map. There's a value here, but I'll have to create a mapping to here as well. So this should actually read alpha. If I want to change it to beta, I have to add it on both sides. So it introduces a complexity which you don't want. And I can tell you, you don't need it. Because what we did is, and I'll go back to my deployment. My deployment also has an empty values file. And what I'd like to do is get my application YAML, which I worked hard on, and just copy the configuration part, and I want to bring it to the Helm file. There will be other Helm parameters in here, like replicas or liveness probes and that kind of stuff. But to set it apart, I'll like to introduce to a separate root element, Spring config, for example, and paste my application YAML underneath. It doesn't have to be the entire file, so I can just remove the alpha feature. I'll say message of the day is not needed. I'll like to overwrite the quote to greetings from the Helm. And I'd like to bring that back into my application. Now here comes the trick. We didn't build anything for this. We just, like anyone should, read the documentation. So if you look at the Spring documentation on how to get your configuration into a Spring or Spring Boot application, there's a lot of known stuff here, like, for example, the application properties or application YAML, which are shown at the start. The environment variables, which is one of the suggestions to get your application config into Kubernetes, for example. But what we came across is this one. The Spring Application JSON. It's a single environment variable which you can put into your Docker container or a pod container in this case, which can hold an entire JSON structure which will override your packaged application YAML. So we have to turn this YAML structure into JSON and bring it to my deployment. And for the quick readers, it was already here. It's these 3 lines. Within this container, I'm creating the Spring Application JSON environment variable. And the value I'd like to put to it is taken from the values file. It's the Spring config element of this YAML file. I'm using the toJSON function to serialize the YAML into JSON, which contains quotes and curly braces and all kind of stuff that's not that nice to YAML. So I'll quote it as a whole. And this will bring the whole YAML configuration into one single environment variable. And now to test it out, I've got a local K3s cluster running on my machine. And on the right, you'll see the K9s, which is a text-based Kubernetes front end. And on the left, there's my command prompt in the chart directory, which I've just shown. And now I can use a Helm command. Helm install. I'll have to give it a name. And what I want to install, the chart in this folder. And I want to supply the values to be overridden in the actual container. So now on the right, you'll see the container being created and up and running. Nice and quick. And if we now go back to my HTTP cheat sheet, there's another set of getters. And they're running on another port, so not the 8080, but the 8090, which points to my Kubernetes cluster. So if I now request the message of the day, is still the same one as in the packaged application. But we get to the quote, and there's a greetings from the Helm. So that's my configuration I just put in. And the alpha feature returns a 404, so it's not available. And the beta feature is also not available. But if I now go back to my values file and enable the beta feature, I'll have to reapply this configuration to my cluster. Instead of Helm install, I'll now do a Helm upgrade, which will only change the necessary bits. But if you're quick, then you can see another container is creating. It should be up and running. It's terminating the other one, so it's a live replacement because the changes in my deployment, your pods get automatically replaced with the new pods with the new configuration. And if I now go back and run the beta, then we get the result of the beta version. So with only 2 lines, I've promised you one chart, but with only 2 lines, I think you can turn any chart into a Spring Boot capable Helm chart. So this is what I want to give you. I'd like to think what you know what you think about it. Come by at our stand, come by up front here and ask questions because I've only got 45 seconds on the clock. So this is my story. A quick shout out to my team at Alliander. I'm working for a VX company. I'm currently contracted to Alliander, and we use this to configure our applications running over there. So this is not a theoretical thing. We're using this in production, and we used the past year, I think, to refine the solution and get really comfortable with it. So big thanks to Alliander as well.